Welcome to a special bonus episode of Significance of Wealth, featuring a conversation originally released on the Risk Ready podcast, presented by the Private Risk Management Association. In this episode, Bryant Kolle, Vice President of National Sales and Insurance Partnerships at Hagerty and host of Risk Ready, sits down with Tom Ruggie, host of Significance of Wealth and founder and CEO of Destiny Family Office, for a conversation on the family office perspective on risk. Tom shares how multifamily offices can help coordinate the many moving pieces that often accompany significant wealth, including investments, estate and tax planning, insurance, governance, legacy planning, and overall risk management. Now, here's Bryant Kolle and Tom Ruggie.
Welcome to the PRMA Risk Ready podcast, our thought leadership series for members focused on everything shaping private risk management today. Because protecting wealthy families isn't just about buying insurance anymore. I'm Diane Delaney, Executive Director and CEO of PRMA.
And I am Bryant Kolle, past chairman of the board and your host for this podcast.
Together, we'll explore the real risks, trends, and stories driving this industry.
From claims to prevention to what's coming next.
Welcome to the show.
All right, welcome in, everybody. Thanks for all of your support. It really means a lot. I would really appreciate if you could take some time, update, please like us, rate us, share with a friend. If you're enjoying our podcast and our conversations, it would mean a lot. Today's conversation is one I've been especially looking forward to because we are stepping a bit outside of traditional insurance. We're talking about the broader family office world, wealth strategies, and holistic risk management. When most people hear the word insurance, they often think about policies, premiums, and claims, stuff like that. But within the family office environment, risk management is often viewed much differently through a wider lens. One that includes, family's balance sheet, legacy, reputation, and long-term continuity across many generations. As affluent families face increasingly complex exposures from evolving lifestyle risks and government challenges to cybersecurity, reputational concerns, and even generational wealth transitionings happening, the need for coordination among trusted advisors has never been more important. So today, I'm really excited. We're joined by Tom Ruggie, founder and CEO of the Destiny Family Office. Tom is a nationally recognized wealth manager, entrepreneur, and family office leader who has spent more than 3 decades building one of the country's premier wealth management organizations focused on serving high net worth and ultra high net worth families. Through Destiny Family Office, Tom helps clients navigate the increasingly complex world which comes with managing significant wealth, integrating investment strategy, estate and tax planning, governance, long-term legacy considerations, and much, much more in a holistic approach. So in today's episodes, the family office view of risk, we're going to discuss how family offices think about protecting things today, what they expect from insurance partners, and how insurance professionals can better position themselves within the broader advisory ecosystem serving affluent families. So Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, Bryant, thank you so much for the great introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and I do want to set one thing in advance for your listeners, which is I am a collector myself. My passion is more in the sports memorabilia area, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit, but that has actually dictated a lot of what I do with our high net worth clients. I do a lot of speaking, write a lot of articles about the pitfalls of having large collections and not having them properly insured and not having them properly documented, et cetera.
I'm really excited because, I read your significant collector newsletter or blog or whatever you want to describe it as. It's really interesting. And, just really quick before we get into, some of the background and what we actually want to talk about, but this is a fun conversation. You recently did a podcast and you recently talked about this Pokemon card that sold for crazy money. It's the Pokemon card was like 16.5 million. Just talk to me a little bit about that. That's amazing,
Well, that was a crazy scenario because when I read about the Pokemon card in the sale, candidly, I was kind of like, what the hell? I just thought it was insane. So As I mentioned, I write a lot about collectibles. And so I got with my marketing team and I'm like, hey, we need to write something about this. And I don't know much about Pokemon cards, but in my mind, it was just an absolute, you know, craziness to pay that kind of money for a Pokemon card. And the article that we wrote effectively reflected that. And about a day later, I get a call from AJ Scaramucci, the Mooch's son in New York, and AJ is who bought the card. And he basically wanted to talk to me about his rationale as to why he bought it. And that ended up becoming a podcast. I do a monthly podcast called Significance of Wealth. And we do have our podcast with AJ there. And while I still think it's insane to pay that much for a card, AJ does give pretty good rationale from his perspective as to, why it's worth what he paid for it. He actually thinks it's worth significantly more.
That's great. I actually listened to that episode, and we'll link it in the show notes, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, it's amazing. Like, I love everything you do, and a big fan.
Well, thanks so much.
So let's start at the beginning. Maybe some of the listeners maybe don't work with family offices every day. Can you just explain the role of a family office and how it works with families and overall financial and personal life, and what that looks like?
Sure. It's probably easier to start with a backdrop of what a single family office is. So single family offices have been around for a long time. Ultra high net worth, which I would define as $1 billion or more of net worth. They literally put together a business, and the whole purpose of that business is to have employees that are monitoring and handling all facets of their overall wealth. So from estate planning to tax planning to investment planning to insurance, risk management, all that stuff. And so what's transpired in particular over probably the last 20 years or so is the concept of a multifamily office. And so I started in the wealth management side of the business 35 years ago. And in 2017, really decided that I wanted to have some focus of what I was personally doing for ultra high net worth individuals on the multifamily office side. And so effectively, the way that I would suggest what our role is kind of an air traffic controller for high net worth individuals. Typically, a $25 million it could be up to $1 billion, but the core is probably 25 million to 250 million of assets. And, somebody like myself or somebody else running a multifamily office, again, my definition is they're an air traffic controller of all the things I previously mentioned, but we're the ones that help to stay on top of that for our clients so that they can spend their time, doing what is the most effective use of their time. So use the investments as an example. It's not that my clients don't have the ability or the brains to do their own investing. It's just not the best use of their time, and they want somebody that they feel they can trust to make decisions on their behalf for them so that they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, great definition of single family office, multi. I appreciate that, and I like the definition or the visual I'm getting of an air traffic controller too. I think that really plays out for people that maybe are not as familiar, because there's certain people on there listening that are super familiar and some that aren't. So we're going to try to bridge the gap of both of these on this podcast today.
Awesome. So I used to use the term quarterback but air traffic controller, and I stole that from somebody, but I was like, that is so appropriate to what we do, because we're literally monitoring everything going on, and some of the things we're doing internal, and some of the things like insurances we're outsourcing.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really, I think it's a fun, I'm obviously not in a family office, but I know a lot of people like you, and I think it's a fun job. It's got to be amazing. I'm sure it has its challenges, but it's so fun, and like the stuff you guys get to do is pretty fun. So
I literally get up out of bed every day and just feel so blessed. This is what I do for a living, not only because of what I do and the impact that I have, but I just have amazing clients, and it makes what I do extremely fun.
It's outstanding. Let's talk about the definition of quote unquote risk management. and how that's evolved within family offices over the last few years. I mean, we're seeing a lot of different changes. How would you say that's, evolved over the last couple of years, what you're seeing?
Brian, I think as a generality, it's just become much more holistic. I think that, you know, my generation and older, which I'll be 58 next month, but my generation and older, it was more kind of cut and dry what, the risk management was. And now with, kind of starts with the internet. And of course, now it's going into AI. Um, and even the collectible space, which I'll talk about in a minute, but there's just a lot more risks and concerns, from cybersecurity to reputational risk, etc. And again, as I said, I'll touch on the collectibles because collectibles as a generality, not just what I collect, but as a generality, the appreciation in collectibles has been significant, and you've seen it in the in the high end car world. You've seen it in watches and bourbon and all that good stuff, and that creates again additional needs from a risk management standpoint. So I think where somebody in your business really needs to be focused is on how to implement a comprehensive overall insurance governance plan.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right with some of those trends, and it's actually a really good segue. I think you're talking about what's kind of new exposures. What types of exposures concern wealthy families today that maybe didn't exist 5, 10 years ago?
I think to some extent they've always existed, but I think that it's got more of a magnification lens on it now, especially for the ultra high net worth, because there's just additional risk that you have when you've built up wealth. you know but as a generality, Bryant, affluent families have very complex assets. Whether it's the high end sports cars or collectible cars, of course, jets, yachts, and much, much more. So, the experts really need to be involved. And to me, a key word is proactively, proactively evaluating, what the liability exposures are. Because, and I'll probably get into this in one of your questions, but I mean, I'm in the business that I'm in, and it took me kind of really opening up my own kimono and looking at my situation to realize I had some, liability issues that I hadn't addressed. And, you know, my mentality was, if somebody that does what I do for a living has this issue, then there's a lot of people that don't do what I do for a living that are probably certainly at risk.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I was talking to this sales coach yesterday, and his comment to me and is resonating with what you're saying is he always likes his sales teams to have big houses, big watches, big cars, big things,
That's right.
because
I
then
already
they
know
have
why. I know the
to,
punchline.
you exactly, I don't have to say it, right?
Yeah. Well, because the more stuff you have, the harder you got to work, the more money you got to
Exactly.
make. Yeah. No, the guy that
100%.
hired me said the same thing. I felt embarrassed when I bought a brand new car, and he's like, "No, no, don't be embarrassed. Like, you got to work, you got to pay it off."
Yes, yes, exactly right. Exactly right. What do you think, what certain lifestyle risks or asset categories do you feel are maybe consistently underestimated or overlooked?
Well, I think, and again, I'm going to point to more so my generation, uh, because I think the younger generation has actually a better feel for this because they've grown up with it. But I think my generation has, specific risks are, digital risk, um, cybersecurity. I think is a huge risk, and frankly, I think that's. I used to say that was going to be the next shoe that's going to drop to have a crippling effect on the market, because I hate to put this out there, but I do think that's going to happen at some point. I think there's going to come a point where something from a cybersecurity standpoint is so broadly taking place that it's going to freeze things. So I think that's a huge risk category. Um, I mentioned reputational risk already, which I think with social media just again gets a magnifying glass on it. And then, I've also already mentioned the physical assets and,
Mhm.
what, and I'll talk about that some more, but I think there's significant risk with physical assets for everybody, but in particular for high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals.
Yeah. So Tom, let's switch a little bit and talk about, how you coordinate across different advisors, and specifically, obviously, our audience is mostly insurance advisors. So how do you evaluate whether a family's insurance structure is aligned with the complexity that we're talking about of their overall wealth and their overall assets and lifestyle?
Well, I think, first and foremost, it needs to be a significant part of an overall plan. Um, Even in my personal situation and going back years ago, the insurance structure is something that can be an isolated function. And I'll go back to that air traffic controller, comment, because that has to be part of what you're looking at so that you have, an alignment with, I have an alignment with my clients of what all their ownership structure is and what their coverage structure is to coincide with that. Going back to the collectibles, it's been put out there by a couple major firms that the ultra high net worth, around 70% have some form of a collection. A lot
Hmm.
of it's cars, a
Yeah.
lot of it's artwork, but there's also kind of the up and coming things like what I collect, the memorabilia space and the Pokemon space. And I said I'd mention this, and Brian, I'll mention it real quick, but I got on the journey that I got on of being very active in speaking about all collectibles, in the risks, including insurances. And so I speak about it. I do podcasts about it. I write about it a lot. But my personal journey is I was redoing my own legal documents, and my collectibles valuation had gone up around 10x in 10 years.
Wow. Wow.
And I was just like, holy crap. I'm not prepared for this. My family's not prepared for this. If I don't make it home tonight, my family has not only do they have no clue about what I have, what it's worth, where to go, is it insured, is it properly insured, is it properly valued, which is key, but also my family doesn't care about my collectibles.
Hmm.
And so there was just this huge gap. And again, I was like, if I've got this gap, there's a big market out there for people that are not properly evaluating what they need to be evaluating from an insurance and a risk management standpoint.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And obviously, with the changes in the market and what's happened, with art and cars and collectibles. And, just a really quick story. For my whole life, I wanted a Porsche, and I bought one a couple years ago. And the way I convinced my wife was I pulled up the values of the Porsches that I was looking at, and I was like, honey, this is almost like a guarantee. And then I didn't want it for investment. I wanted it because I would like the car. But I said, this is almost a guaranteed asset that will not go down in value. And she let me buy it, and I've just enjoyed it so much. And to your point, like it's crazy. We kind of like don't look at something for 2 or 3 years, 4 years, and then boom, like what has the value changed? It's really crazy. So
Well, Brian, obviously you did a great job selling that. Um, I had the exact same experience as I was building up my sports collection. I put it out there and defined it as an investment, part of
mhm,
our overall investment portfolio.
mhm.
And candidly, it was a pure sales pitch at the time that I was doing it. But the reality is, knock on wood, it has turned out to be just an unbelievable investment. Uh,
Yeah,
but I think most of us that are collectors have crossed that same path at one point in their life.
I agree. Absolutely. I just hope we all continue to, have that go up to the right, the graph up to the right,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about the lifestyle risk and, these big lifestyles that we're working with. What kind of conversations are you having with family members, around, family offices and family members around, domestic staff, social media exposure, travel, reputation. You mentioned all these. What specific conversations does that look like from, family office perspective?
The conversation is and I have kind of already mentioned this, but we're in a different world now, and the risks are different. And what traditionally has been thought of as risk management, a lot of it's well taken care of because that's been an issue for many years, and so there's been things put in place to execute on that. But to your point, when it has to be a large priority, and it has to be a significant discussion point about personal security, reputational security. Just as an example, and you mentioned social media, but I mean, social media unintentionally can create significant security and privacy issues.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, I actually believe that the younger generation is pretty in tune with this, but the older generation is not necessarily the case. Um, Domestic staffing issue. You mentioned that. I hadn't mentioned that yet. I don't believe, but a lot of my family office clients have domestic staff, and that creates an additional layer of risk that needs to be discussed and evaluated. And you also mentioned travel risk. You know, I just had a client travel overseas. He called me last Thursday, and we had the discussion of, you know, do we have the proper risk measurements in place? I mean, what he was concerned about is, hey, where I am is if I had a medical issue, is probably not where I want to be taken care of. And so, what does that medical evacuation look like? And so, fortunately, we did have that in place for him, and we reviewed it again, and gave him, what ultimately my job is, and ultimately my job is to create peace of mind for my clients. And another philosophy or theory that I have, Brian, is I I always tell my clients, I want to be the first call. I want to be the first call when there's a question or a concern, or something positive, something negative, family thing, everything. As part of that air traffic controller, it's being involved in all aspects of somebody's life. In this example of this person calling me on a Thursday, leaving Friday, but hey, do I have everything together? That's what the role is.
Yeah. So I mean, there's two things I want to drill into that you said. One, the air traffic control I like because it's better than a quarterback, because the air traffic control is a better analogy. So how do you balance that, like personal freedom? The type of clients we work with want personal freedom. They don't want anyone telling them what to do, and lifestyle convenience with that risk oversight and accountability. So like, how do you balance that? Like, what if someone wants to go to Africa right now in the middle of an Ebola breakout? Like, how do you balance that, Tom?
It's Brian, it's a very fine line. I mean, my goal is to create structures so that my clients can live confidently and enjoy their life. And as part of that, what I tell my clients is my role is to every piece that I'm touching on, and as the air traffic controller, is for them to know as much as they need to know about it or want to know about it, but to it not ever be something that they're worried about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I said, it's a really fine line between creating that, but it is a very important aspect of what we do for our clients.
I love that answer. That's a really good insight. And you talked about this. How do you think younger generations are approaching risk differently? Are they better prepared than older generations in some areas? Are they underprepared? What do you think?
I think they're, as a generality, I think they're better prepared. They've grown up with social media. They've grown up with immediate access to data. They have seen, the pitfalls that come with all of those things, whether it's, directly to them, but certainly to somebody that they know. And so I think that they gravitate towards being more concerned and more cautious about what some of these risks are. And again, as a generality, my experience is they're more in tune with what those risks are.
That's good. I know the younger generations get a lot of flack from the older generations, but maybe they're slightly ahead in this situation. Maybe we'll see.
Well, to the older generation's credit, they might be slightly ahead and not something that they develop, but something that is a dominating factor in their lives.
Yeah, well said. I agree with that. Absolutely. So I want to give our members and listeners some actionable insights and what serving family office clients might look like from your chair. So what does responsiveness and communication look like at the ultra high net worth level? That's always a very intriguing question a lot of people like to ask.
Well, and I've got a one word answer that I'll expand upon a little bit, but everything is my answer.
Mm.
The ability to respond to clients when they need it is, one of the most important things that we do. The basis of what clients look for in my business, in your business, we know what that is. You've got to get the big things right to keep the business, but to earn the business or keep the business long time, it really should be a value discussion. What's the value that is being created? What are you doing for that? And it's I always say again, you got to get the big things right, but it's the little things that make a difference.
Yeah.
It's being proactive. It is returning calls on a timely basis. It's doing what you say you're going to do. And the crazy thing is it sounds so simple, and yet so many individuals and so many businesses don't execute on that.
Yeah.
And that to me is everything.
I totally agree. In a world of AI and digital everything and automated everything, the more you can be a real human and an advisor and I talk to people, I think that's just, you can't overlook that, right? And actually, this is a really good segue. A lot of what we're talking about is how people can be trusted advisors. So what separate when the family office is evaluating an insurance partner, what separates, someone from being looked at as a strategic advisor from just a vendor, offering 15% off, type of thing? What would you recommend family offices are looking at in that situation?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the word partner, Bryant, because that's what I look for. I look for partners. I look for people that are dialed in with the same, kind of culture that I have and my firm has. I mean, you've got to look for trust. You've got to look for value. I always tell people, I think a big differentiator for me versus a lot of people that are in this space is I'm my own client. And what I mean by that is I started from nothing. I built this business from scratch, and now I've done well for myself. I am my own multifamily office client, but when I'm talking to clients, I've personally lived through and done most everything that they're living through and what they need. And to have a relationship that is not about selling products or not about having an agenda, but really kind of the context of, hey, knowing what I know, if I were you, this is exactly what I would do and why. And that's a partnership. That's not a salesperson. And with all due respect to your industry, and my first job in my industry was on the life insurance side. But, a lot of insurance people are just pure salespeople, and it's, get the sale across the finish line. And even as a relatively young kid, just graduating college, I moved away from that. I was with him for 3 years, and it was very, very beneficial for a lot of reasons. But the reality is, even at 25 years old, I knew I didn't want to be a salesperson. I wanted to be somebody that adds value, makes a difference, creates a great, experience for our clients. And that's what I'd recommend anybody in your business, anybody in my business, and frankly, anybody in any business to do.
Really insightful. I couldn't have agree more. I think, people always talk about the relationships, but do you actually really have them? Do you have them developed? And are you seeing things from their perspective and not just yours? And I could keep going on that question forever, but I know we're getting a little towards the end here. Tom, I just want to, we have a couple minutes left, a couple more questions. I just want to hit a couple of quick things, if that's cool.
Of course.
What emerging risks are keeping family offices up at night, or what things are you paying closer attention to now that maybe a couple years ago weren't even on your radar?
Real quickly, I'd say geopolitical risks are there. I mentioned the global risks earlier, but I was at a family office forum down in West Palm Beach a few weeks ago, and a great speaker from a law firm up in Connecticut was talking about how many high net worth people are getting secondary homes outside of the country. And it was just an amazing, fascinating conversation. But, Brian, I'm going to fall back on the cybersecurity. As I mentioned, for 10 years now, I've said cybersecurity is going to be the next shoe to drop that kind of has a huge impact on the investment market. I don't know that that's the case right now, because I think we're going to get into, ultimately, not now, but I think we're going to get into an AI bubble in the market, and I think that's going to, bring kind of the next market pullback. But again, I know at some point that a major cybersecurity threat is going to come to fruition, and just protecting as much as you can from that, but also protecting your personal data, your financial data. Somebody in my Tiger 21 meeting yesterday was talking about somebody they knew that, somebody got into their bank account and stole $785,000, and it went to China, and they're never going to get that back. Fortunately, again, they've got the insurance protection to cover it. But, again, you hear stuff like that, and to me, you're just going to hear more and more and more of that.
Interesting. Well, good to pay attention to that. I couldn't agree more. If you could give one piece of advice to insurance professionals who really want to try to serve affluent families better, what would it be?
Brian, I talked about this already. I'll probably repeat myself a little bit, but I think the importance of creating a sound experience where, as a client, you feel that your advisor is truly looking for your best interest, not his or her own best interest. I think part of that also comes with, offering unbiased advice. And, we have one of our core values in our firm is do the right thing, period.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's always having that lens of what is best for the client. And, I think that's, that pretty much summarizes it.
Absolutely. I was going to tell a story, but we don't have time. I'm going to ask you one last question. At the end of the day, what do you think protecting wealth truly means to you, just beyond preserving assets?
Well, my roundabout answer is I've developed a couple of scorecards. I do have a collectible scorecard, which is what I developed after realizing that I had a personal issue. So I developed that as a roadmap to help collectors of any kind to evaluate what they ought to be doing, including, from insurance to valuation, et cetera. But I also have a scorecard that I developed for my family office, and it goes through all the topics that we've discussed a lot of already. Where are you readiness wise for estate planning, tax planning, wealth planning, alternative direct investments. We happen to do a ton of direct investments within our firm, and there's different risks that come with that. But the very last question on the scorecard, which is question number 13, is peace of mind. And that to me is ultimately, the most important aspect of what we do. Is our set goal is to provide clients peace of mind that all these different areas are being taken care of to the best of their and our ability. And I know we're running low on time, but I'll just give a quick example of that. My best clients are delegators, and I have a philosophy that most people should spend as much time as possible doing the three most important things that they can consider is important to them. And it can be just pure business. You can have family separate or whatever, but everything else, in my opinion, should be delegated to somebody that you can trust to take care of that. And so my example is, we've hired an AI specialist within our firm. It came from Amazon, headed up a AI group there, uber intelligent person. And, could I take the time and learn about that myself? Absolutely, I could. But it's not the best use. Not only is it not the best use of my time, it's not even what I get the most enjoyment out of. And so, to me, that peace of mind goes back to hiring the right people that help to make sure you've got the peace of mind that you need in all components of your overall situation.
I love that insight. That's probably so, you can take that in so many different areas, but I think just in general, over everyday life, not talking about family offices or anything, that is an outstanding principle to live by. I am going to take that for sure, Tom. Well, Tom, this is why I'm such a fan of yours. I'm a big fan. Love your podcast. But you mentioned at the beginning significance of wealth. We'll put it in the show notes. Highly recommend our listeners. He just did one. His latest, by the time this comes out, maybe another one. But he just did one on AI. Is really, really good. Tom, really, really appreciate you spending some time with us today, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Brian. It was my pleasure. Definitely enjoyed it, and the AI significance of wealth podcast that you're talking about. I actually interviewed Sean, which is who we hired to handle the AI for us, and it's for a lot of people, it's a scary yet at the same time exciting stage of where we are. I used to say, we're in a once in a generation moment, and frankly, I think we're in a once in a century moment. I mean, I compare the AI revolution to the industrial revolution, and and that's a much broader discussion. But there's so many complementary analysis or comparisons between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks for listening today. For more insights and education from the high net worth insurance community, visit privateriskmanagement.org. Until next time, stay risk ready.
Thank you for listening to this special bonus episode of Significance of Wealth. A special thank you to Bryant Kolle, Diane Delaney, and the Private Risk Management Association for hosting Tom Ruggie on Risk Ready and for allowing us to share this conversation with our audience. For more insights, education, and resources from the high net worth insurance community, visit privateriskmanagement.org to learn more about PRMA and its work supporting professionals who serve affluent families. To learn more about Destiny Family Office, visit destinyfamilyoffice.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Significance of Wealth. Please note, this episode was originally produced by Risk Ready, presented by the Private Risk Management Association, and is being shared here with permission. References to PRMA, Risk Ready, Hagerty, or any third-party organization are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement, testimonial, recommendation, or solicitation by Destiny Family Office or its affiliates. The expressed views, thoughts, and opinions belong solely to the host and/or guests and are not investment recommendations or opinions issued by Destiny Family Office or its affiliates. Investment advisory services are offered through Destiny Family Office, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Destiny Family Office podcasts are the sole property of Destiny Family Office, and information provided is for informational and educational purposes only. Learn more at destinyfamilyoffice.com/disclosures.